and welcome to episode 6 of the Zag Talk podcast. We've got a very special guest joining us today in former Gonzaga basketball manager, RFC assistant director, and all-time Gonzaga legend, Tyler Seth. We are also going to talk about the BYU game, as well as the Portland game and Joel Ayayi's triple-double.
All right, we're going to quickly touch on two of Gonzaga's games this last week, a 86-69 win at home against BYU, and then the first true road game of the season at Portland with a 116-88 win. Dylan, what are some of your thoughts on the BYU win?
Yeah, I mean, not a ton of thoughts on the first 3 minutes of the game. I mean, when you get out to, 3-5 minutes of the game, when you get out to a 23-2 lead, like, you kind of got, especially against a team like Gonzaga, that's something you're going to have in the bag from that point on. And I think it showed in BYU's face as well. There was, a couple of times when they started to make comebacks. I think they made it, 12 again by the end of the first, at some point in the rest of the first half. But when you come out and you have that dominating a performance against not just a WCC team, but really any team, most teams in NCAA basketball, you're probably going to end up with a win in that game. So I think it was really cool to see them absolutely trounce a team like BYU, who I think, we'll talk about it a little bit with Tyler in the interview at the end of this episode, but there isn't really anybody in the WCC that's going to give us fits. I think we can, find different things that different teams do well and, a couple of good players on another team. But it's not going to make a difference when you're going up against a team who has, basically 8 starters at this point that would start on any other team in the country. So, we're just completely outmanning teams. I don't think we played amazing. There wasn't some statistical outlier for us. I mean, it just shows that this team is so well-rounded, so defensively sound, on rotations, which was one of the worries I think we had at the beginning of the season, that this is going to be, as much as I hate to say it and as much as other people love to say it, WCC is going to be a walk in the park, I think, for Gonzaga. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, the start to the game, like you said, was just crazy. I tweeted about this, and it reminded me of the Titus and Tate podcast where Titus was talking about against Virginia, and he was given an overview of Gonzaga, and he was like, you're playing against one of the historically great defensive teams over the last decade, and first play of the game, Kispert pops off a screen, catches the ball at 24 feet, doesn't even think twice, and just bottoms it. You just have to laugh, and that's what he said. He just would laugh at certain points of watching the offense, and for the first 23 points of this game, every time we scored, I was just laughing, because it's like, how do you stop this? You got Kispert easy to the bucket, and then you have Suggs exploding around the corner, and then you have Timmy with a post move and then a putback with 3 guys around him, and it's just how do you stop this team? They hit you from so many different angles, and then Nembhard comes in and starts hitting threes all over the place, and that's just, I think, for other teams is just completely demoralizing, because that's the one thing that you maybe have against them is if they have an off shooting night, and we'll touch on this when we talk about the Portland game, but we are kind of immune to an off shooting night as well from outside. But I mean, just crazy. Props to BYU though, for not, completely caving and just laying down and letting it really get out of hand. We watched the Michigan and Wisconsin game yesterday where Wisconsin scored 6 points in 15 minutes and just really looked like they had given up, and BYU didn't do that. They made a little push at the end of the first half, cut it to I guess it was 52-29 at half. But yeah, overall, I mean, it's tough. The second half of these games in the WCC, I think, are going to be a little boring, frustrating at times, because we won't have that super efficient and effective offense in as we try out some different lineups. But we did get Ben Gregg in there. And then obviously in Portland, we'll talk about that. He got some minutes there too. But overall, Kispert, probably his first bad shooting game of the year, and he still had 23 points.
Still shot better than 50% from the field. Yeah, still hit 2 threes.
Yeah, he was 2 of 5 from 3. He was 9 of 16 from the field. It felt like he was not shooting it super well and having a down night. And then you look at the score, at the box score, and 23 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals. Like, come on, like it's nuts. Suggs had a pretty good game with 16 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. Timmy chipped in 12, and Nemhard off the bench, like we said, he was 4 of 7 from 3. 3 of those missed threes, honestly, were in the second half when they kind of got out of sorts, and the shot clock just had to kind of, hook something up. But really good to see him getting back on track. And then obviously we've talked about Ayayi getting back on track over the last few weeks too. So
one thing for Ayayi too, like and obviously the Portland game was not the silent killer that he normally is, but he played 33 minutes in this game. Ayayi's playing pretty consistently the second most minutes on the team. And he can have I'm doing air quotes, quiet game. He had 8 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists. That's quiet for him. I just think like he's such a silent force out there, whether it's getting rebounds or making the right pass. I think we were maybe worried about him defensively. I think he's been pretty solid defensively this year. And I think that for me was like, it wasn't even, I laughed, I think at the, like you did at a lot of the offensive stuff in that first 5 minutes of the game, that Timmy put back with 3 guys draped over him was pretty crazy. And I think, some of those pull-ups from Kispert and drives to the basket, Nemhard's first couple of threes, like that's all laughable stuff. But I think something that I was like very seriously watching was like, how did the defense look against a pretty balanced BYU team? Like they are one of the better balanced teams in the WCC, and their rotations, their switches, the fact that they were able to jump gaps and they weren't getting backdoored, they weren't getting, and maybe that's on BYU I think they were probably a little bit stunned in those first couple of minutes. They didn't know where to go with that ball, but yeah, they really shut down the entire offense of BYU. It's a bummer Matt Harms got, kind of knocked up in the first couple minutes of the game. I think that also probably put a little bit of damper on any sort of comeback. I mean, he only ended up playing 22 minutes, so that was tough too. But yeah, credit to BYU. I do think they're going to be a good team in the future. Like they're going to worry me if we're not as dominant as we are this year in the future. Both Loner and George, I think, are going to be really good players for them in the coming seasons. And I think both of those guys are pretty young. Pretty young in playing years. Who knows how old those guys actually are with missions and everything.
Loner, he's going to be a stud. He was a stud in high school, and that was a big get for them. But he was in high school last year, so I don't know if he's planning to. I don't know if he's Mormon, so I assume he is. I feel like that's generally a fair assumption with BYU athletes, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if he's planning to do his mission after this year. That would be kind of an interesting, he comes back in 2 years and suddenly you got a guy with 3 years of eligibility left, and he could be a monster. But yeah, I mean, we've seen this before where we've beaten them by 20-some, 30-some points in the past few years in our first matchup against them. And then the second matchup ends up being really close, or even like last year we lost. But I really don't see it. I think they could give us more of a fight, but I really don't see this game being within 10 points. They showed some promise on a few defensive possessions at the end of the first half and maybe a little in the second, where they were really disciplined on getting over the screens and making it really tough for us to get into our pick and rolls and come off those screens with open looks. But it's just, you got to be doing that all game long. You can't take a break, and I just don't see that happening and still being able to play offense. You talked about Matt Harms. I texted you guys during the game and was just like, man, I don't know about you guys, but I'm happy we didn't end up getting him in the transfer market. We were one of the final schools he was looking at, and I was really hoping we'd get him. I thought it'd be nice with Petrushev being gone, but after watching it, and I know he was a little banged up, but I think the way that he moves, and he's not super fast, I think having that as like a key piece of our offense or one of our main lineups would have really, really slowed this offense down. Same way that Petrushev would have if he was here this year. We would have been a lot more stagnant and tried to force it in the post a little bit more. And so I'm just glad that he's not here, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it would have been a timing thing too. Like I do think watching him, like he definitely is a player that I think Mark Few would thrive in coaching out of a transfer type thing. And I would have loved to see his development at Gonzaga, and in a different season, maybe that's a good fit. But I absolutely agree. Like that's not a guy you want to put on the court with. You can't put him on the court with your small ball lineup that you got this year with Timmy being your center. So yeah, I totally agree. I think my last takeaway from the BYU game, please stop with the Alabama football stuff. I'm over it. I'm done with it. I don't want to see it anymore. I absolutely loved the comment that Jalen Suggs reminds. I think it was Sean Farnham who said he reminds him of Deion Sanders. I'm cool with like individual comparisons like that. I do think for a guy like Jalen Suggs, we've talked about it a million times. He played football in high school. He's a two-sport athlete. Yeah. Comparing him to Deion Sanders, great comparison. I think he plays a lot like Deion Sanders. We got to stop with the Alabama football stuff. It's just not the same. Like, I'll let you go in on this too, because I know you have lots of thoughts as well.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a little. I think they're just trying to push it. The national championship was coming up a few days afterwards, and I will say, after watching Alabama in the national championship and in the college football playoff, like, yeah, if you're talking about like nobody can stop this team, like you could have one of the best defenses out there, and they're still going to drop 85 plus 90, maybe 100 points on you. Sure. But some of the player comparisons seemed like a little bit of a stretch, like Jalen Suggs and Mac Jones. Like, did you see the picture of Mac Jones after the game with a shirt off? Those are not the same player whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, I think, they're trying to bring in some football fans as the season's wrapping up, and they're trying to, get some conversation started. I don't really think we'll see much of that moving forward as we get further away from college football season. But I don't know. They're looking for stuff to talk about during some of these blowouts, so can't blame them too much. I will say my last thing, I really don't know. We've had talk about it this year of maybe a 2 bid, maybe a 3 or 4 bid at one point with San Francisco after they beat Virginia. I don't see it. I think maybe we get a second team, but I had a conversation with somebody on Twitter, and even looking at BYU, like resume wise, they're in the 60s or 70s, Ken Palm wise, and net, I think maybe they're in the 40s or 50s, but like don't really have any huge wins. Yeah, they beat San Diego State. I think at the end of the year, that's not going to be as strong of a win as it was at the time. They beat Utah, who's going to be playing in a super weak Pac-12. St. Mary's just lost to LMU at home and got throttled by San Diego State. Don't really have a huge win on their resume. So honestly, I could see it being a 1-bid league, and I think that's I'd be completely fine with that just because I don't think it's there. I would love to have more in there, and hopefully BYU and St. Mary's can separate themselves. And who knows what this year kind of, it's strong up top and in the middle, but I think the back end of college basketball this year in terms of the tournament, it is a little bit more open. But, the selection committee is looking at a Duke or North Carolina on the bubble versus a BYU. They're going to be able to pretty easily find probably better wins that they can justify putting in their guys, Duke and North Carolina, over a BYU or St. Mary's. So I don't know. Right now, I don't see it. I haven't seen it so far this year.
Hopefully, someone's gonna have to knock off Gonzaga for them to have a shot.
There's just no other opportunities,
that's
really
the reality of what it is at this point, I think.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to happen. So moving to the Portland game, I mean, this will be pretty quick. It was 116-88 throttling of the Pilots down here in Portland. Yeah, I don't know. This one thing I said before was, it's been talked about with this team being kind of immune to an off shooting night. And this is the perfect example of it. Shot 23.5% from three. We were 4 of 17. And yet our total field goal percentage was 62.9, 63% on the game, 44 of 70. Like, this team, first of all, we don't rely a lot on 3-point shots. And we don't necessarily need to shoot a super high clip like we have here. And that's why when we do shoot well, it's just like you throw your hands up and how do you stop this team? Because you can't even stop the team when they can't make a three. I mean, you have 12 points coming from threes and you've scored 116 points. That's absurd. And yeah, I mean, the other thing, Dylan, I'll let you kind of talk about the IEI game, and Timmy and Watson had big games. So maybe you want to go into that a little bit.
Yeah, the IEI thing is really impressive. First ever Zag to put up a triple-double. I think we all saw that coming at some point in WCC. I mean, he's had the points and rebounds numbers. It was just getting there on the assist level, and he finishes with 14, which might be, I think, maybe the most impressive stat of the night. Not a ton to say there. I took a page out of Tyler Seth's notes, and when we talked earlier in the week, and decided, yeah, I'm probably just gonna watch a little bit of the second half, catch some highlights. It's just not worth. It's honestly frustrating, right, to watch the second half and see a more disjointed offense, just because you have a lot of bench players getting minutes and you have combinations of guys out there that you don't normally see. So a little bit tougher to watch, but yeah, AIA overall just so impressive. I think the other thing is Watson putting up 23 is huge, right? This is the game you guys mentioned the other week. Like, this is the game where a couple years ago, last year, he popped his shoulder out like twice, and that was kind of the beginning of the end of his season, if not the end of his season, that game. But yeah, just watching him dominate, I think 8 of 9 from the field is awesome. He wasn't forcing anything. He hit that 3, so that's big too, showing a little bit of confidence from outside. He was 6 of 7 from the line. Like, the shooting's there. And if he gets going and he's putting up double digits a night, like, it's over. Like, you've got an entire starting unit that is scoring in double digits. And I know we've had that before, but scoring in double digits with the dominance that they score in as well, and as quick as they score, is going to be really hard to overcome. Especially when you got multiple guys scoring in the 20s as well, right? Like, not only just in the double digits, but in the 20s. And the passing on this team is phenomenal. I think only other stat of note, Strother had 12 and 3. So that's pretty cool too. I think he played really well. He in only 8 minutes as well. So impressive. Dom, quiet night. Omar had a good night. Nemhard, again, really well. I think he's going to be like, and Cook also checked in for 11 minutes. So good to see him back out there. Didn't score at all, but I mean, what are you going to do against a team like Portland when you only play 11 minutes and you're coming off a knee injury? You're not going to push it. You're not going to force anything. So overall, really good night from the Zags, statistically speaking.
And Ben Gregg getting in there too at the end, got 4 minutes back in home state, not exactly hometown, but home state of Oregon, and got his first points of his career too. So that was cool to see. Good for him. I saw he's wearing his Portland gear, kind of Under Armour base layer thing too. So he's putting on for the hometown, and good to see him get out there, get some points. So yeah, I mean, like you said, Watson, that was huge. He was 8 of 9 from the field, hit a 3. So that kind of put him up. We're going to be talking with Evan soon from Evan Mia Analytics, but that now puts all 6 of Gonzaga's main 6 rotation guys in the top 15 of his individual player rankings. Is now Anton Watson's up to number 14. Obviously getting a bump offensively, rating-wise over these last few games. So, I mean, just crazy. Like you said, if you get those 6 guys all clicking, like, any of them can score now. They've shown 20 points any given night. The only one that, against a really good team, Watson, maybe not there yet, but he has the ability. And when you got 6 guys who can do that, like, even if 2 of them are having an off night, it doesn't matter, because you're going to have, like, against Portland, 26 from Timmy, 23 from Watson. Kispert, another kind of off night, still shot 50% from the field, but was 2 of 7 from 3. And guess what? He still had 14 points and 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Suggs had 11, Ayayi 12. I guess if you're getting nitpicky over these last 2 games, Suggs still a little turnover prone, especially against BYU. We'll talk about that in our interview with Tyler here coming up. I think sometimes it gets so stagnant, and these guys get a little bored that they try to force stuff, especially as a freshman, like Suggs. that you can get a little antsy. And then in the Portland game, he's dealt with foul trouble so far this year, which you see from freshmen. The hope is here that he'll, clean that up by the time we get to March, because you don't want a Zach Collins situation where you're sitting out with fouls in a really big game when he's shown that he shines in those games. So it's all development. I mean, he's looked great. There's really not much to complain about. So,
I think we missed it. I think we missed it in the BYU conversation just now, but that pass as well, that full court dime to Ayayi for the layup, and probably an and one in my opinion, but whatever. Doesn't really matter. Ayayi made it. So, golly, the passing from him is just insane, right? Like you said, he's a little bit turnover prone, but, the assist to turnover ratio is there too. Like, it's still pretty decent. He's not, getting no assists and turning the ball over 4 or 5 times. And if he's going to throw passes like that, like, I'll take a couple of, in games like this, I'm going to take a couple of bad turnovers every time if we get to see highlights like that. I literally just saw it a couple minutes ago, but, Gonzaga's produced probably one of the best passers in both NBA and WNBA history, in Stockton and Vandersloot. And then you've got, potentially another guy in the waiting. I mean, he's going to be a top 3 pick in the NBA, most likely, knock on wood. And he's going to continue that passing prowess in the NBA as well, I can already tell. So, yeah, just an impressive guy. Nonetheless, he definitely doesn't look like a freshman out there for the most part, which is pretty cool to see as well.
Yeah, and before we wrap this up, I'll just give one last shout out to Andrew Nemhard. Right now, he has 54 assists on the season with only 12 turnovers, which is good for a 4.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. I mean, crazy efficient. You got that guy coming off your bench. Like they said, if somebody's having a bad game or Suggs is in foul trouble, you got a guy who's starting on every other team in the country probably and takes care of the ball. You're not worried about him turning it over. So, I mean, just phenomenal weapon to have off the bench or even starting second halves, whatever he does. So,
yeah, and I know all these other bench guys aren't going to consistently get 8 minutes when it comes to tournament time, but if you've got one of them having the games that they've all individually had, Ballo had his game, Dom's had his game or two, Strother's now had his game or two, like, give those guys a little bit of confidence, get them cooking and, through WCC play. And, you need someone to step up and give you 4 points in 6 minutes in the tournament. Like, we've got guys that can do that. And when you have 7 other weapons, I think if you include Cook in that 7 weapons thing and you add in another bench player that can step up, like, I don't know what you can do to stop that. I don't think there's much you can do.
Well, it was continued on our good start for the WCC with those 2 wins. We got Pepperdine and St. Mary's coming up, so hopefully we can build on this 12-0 start and, keep the ball rolling and pick up some steam heading into the end of the season in March and April. So we're going to hop into our interview here with Tyler Seth, T-Seth. So hope you guys enjoy.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are here joined by a Gonzaga legend, someone who loved Gonzaga so much he just never left. I'm talking about Tyler Seth, aka T-Nut, and current assistant director of the Rudolph Fitness Center. Tyler, as a way of getting started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
First of all, just want to say thanks for having me on the podcast, boys. You guys were all great employees, some better than others, but all showed up to work, which was important. Just still living in the SPO. Love Spokane. Didn't care for it as much when I was an undergrad, but now it's a great place. Just had a kid 6 months ago, so Cooper got a little boy. He's crushing it. Already a Zags fan. Never seen them lose, which is really cool. And yeah, just living the dream out here.
That's great. So what's the timeline for stay-at-home dad life?
That's a great question. I think I really auditioned well during the pandemic and the stay-at-home kind of order. So I think I showed my wife what I'm capable of. So the hope is maybe next promotion from her, we could pull the trigger for me to be officially stay at home.
Boom. That's awesome. I'm jealous. At this point, I've got the work from home dog dad lifestyle myself. So
that's a strong one.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Dylan, any pets, children?
I have a cat, which is much easier to take care of than a dog. So I would say little to no responsibility there. Scooping the litter box, I feel like, is probably the biggest chore I have to do with her.
Love it. Love it. Awesome. Well, let's get into it a little bit. Tyler, I think we're all curious to hear about your time as a team manager and what that was all like. So I think first question for me was, generally what was that experience like for you? I'm sure it was, it's unique to only a few dozen folks being a water boy for a perennial basketball powerhouse. So what was that like?
Yeah, that's probably one of the greatest experiences of my life, no question. I think if you're a basketball fan, and if you're a Zags fan, that's even like 10 times that, right? Because the Zags are the best. But yeah, growing up, I played a ton of sports, but I always kind of had like that coach in me. Like I always wanted to be a coach. I was the kid that, like, if I was playing, but I thought someone on the bench could help us win, I'd like sub myself out. Like that kind of had that in me. I didn't, no ego. Like I just want to win at the end of the day. So going into being a manager, I really wanted to get into coaching is what I thought. And yeah, it was unbelievable. I mean, those guys are the best. That coaching staff is next level. Some could argue the greatest in the nation. And yeah, I just learned a ton. Hoops junkie, loved it. Every second of it was the best.
For people listening, remind us, what years were you on as a water boy?
I was 2008 to 2012. Probably not considered our greatest era. I would like to think we had good personalities on the team, but yeah, that was my time there. So my freshman year, the seniors were like Pargo, Heitfeld, Micah Downs, Ira, and then my last year, the freshmen were Pangos and Gary Bell. So I kind of had them their first year, and then so a wide variety of personalities, you could say.
No doubt. What's Fewy like in practice? I think that's one thing that a whole bunch of Zag fans are really curious about. It seems like the coaching staff is kind of tight-lipped with a lot of things, and I think the biggest close-up we ever got of that was the HBO documentary a few years back. But really curious to know, like, what's practice is like being run by Mark Few and Tommy Lloyd.
Yeah, so I'd be interested to see them now compared to when I was there. When I was there, it was very casual, and I think it's still that because that's kind of Fewey's vibe, right? Like he's not going to take anything too serious. He wants to win at all. Like that's his thing. Like winning, clearly his highest winning percentage in the country, active coaches. But he'd always have like his kids around practice, kind of like shooting on the side of the hoops. He doesn't take control a lot, meaning he lets his assistant coaches do what they're great at. So each scouting report would rotate between the assistants, which I thought was awesome because normally you think like a head coach is just going to like control everything and have all this, like it has to be his way or the highway. And Fewey really lets the other coaches do the scouting report and then chimes in obviously with his expertise. But those guys have been working together for so long, like him and Tommy and now B-Mike, that they don't really have to talk to each other. They already kind of know what they're looking to get done each and every day.
Yeah, I remember back in, I think I was in 9th grade. I went to Gonzaga basketball camp. In fact, you were probably there, which
I was probably
wild.
working it.
But yeah, the guys at the time were Matt Bolden, Rob was there, and Andy Poling was
Condor. The Condor, they called him.
Yeah, it's funny. I actually ended up seeing him play later in person because he transferred to. Did he transfer from or to SPU?
To SPU from GU.
That's what I thought. Yeah, Coach Michelson basically ran the whole thing. And so going from that to now, a major part of the coaching staff and everything. Yeah, pretty cool to see his career progression and everything. So, yeah. Carson, you want to shoot?
Yeah. So best memory from your time as a manager?
Best memory. There's so many good times. To put it to one, that's tough. I'd probably trying to think if there's a time that I really like came in clutch. Don't think that was the case. I was more of a social water boy. I'd say best was probably senior night, like being able to go on the court, have my family out there. I got to speak after. I don't know if managers still do that, but I got to speak, and I was like, I get kind of amped up, and I was like, yeah, let's go to the WCC and kick some. And I almost said ass. Like, sorry, I don't know if you can cuss here, but I almost said ass in front of the whole McCarthy Athletic Center. And I was like, go kick some. And I said, but on the mic, like in front of everybody. So that kind of was me. I was loud. I wore bow ties. Like I rented red tux pants that night, had like a checkered red, white, and blue sport coat. Like I thought I was looking fresh. Fewy was not impressed. That is a fact. Like, Tina, what are you wearing? And I just said, oh, it's just my last time on the court. I got to go out with a bang. So that's probably the highlight, the end. Just kind of you reflect on everything that you've done. And yeah, we won, which was nice.
I know a couple other managers that I knew when we were there had to dress up as the mascot a few times on away games and at the tournaments and stuff. Did you ever have to dress up as Spike?
No, we didn't. We didn't travel Spike then. I did have to dress up as Spike for some of the kids, coaches' kids' birthdays though, and we would do it in Martin Center, and we'd lower the hoop, and I would just try to dunk on them the whole time. Like that's all I would do is Spike dunking on them in Martin Center because you could crank the hoops down to like 7 feet, and so yeah, I would just. It was hot, but I was just trying to literally dunk on every kid there. So yeah, that was a fun birthday.
Love it.
Seth, you said kind of at the beginning that you were in that 2008, 2012 range. It wasn't like, some of the perennial teams that we, the names we know now, an everyday name, but you've kind of gotten also to stay for the rise of the new era of Zags that aren't just consistent trips to March Madness and winning the WCC, but, number one teams in the country, consistent elite 8 trips. What do you think is the biggest difference between those previous teams, not just the years we were there, but, from 1999 on and the teams the last 3, 4, or 5 years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think the big thing is just people getting to know who Gonzaga is, who our coaching staff is. I just think the more exposure we get, the more our former players kind of just reflect on the program. One thing I love about the Zags is our alum are just diehard Zags as well. Like you'll see people tweeting, Sabonis is going to retweet the Zags won that night. Like how many NBA All-Stars are still hyping up their college team to the degree that we are, and they're all close and they all hang out. And I think that's just naturally progressed. And as we've gotten better, we'd be able to recruit better guys. At the end of the day, we're getting better guys. And I remember reading or hearing Jay Wright talk after they went to the championship and won it all. And he goes, you don't see the impacts of recruiting until 3 to 4 years down the road from when you go to the national championship. And I think we're seeing that now because those kids that are 7th, 8th grade watching the NCAA tournament with their dad or their mom or their family, they're like, oh, Gonzaga, what? Oh, they play super fast. Oh, I love the way they play offense. Shoot, like, okay, I'm going to go there. And I think you're kind of seeing that with our recruits this year. Next year's looking awesome, and I only think it's going to get better.
It's interesting you mentioned playing fast because I actually, because I'm a glutton for punishment, and I rewatched the national championship game a few weeks ago. Just, I don't know why. I needed to relive it a little bit for some reason. What stuck out to me was how slow we looked and how fast UNC looked. Do you think that Coach Few learned from that experience and understanding that, oh shoot, when it comes to actually making a push when we need to be able to play fast, and it's better to be in that mode most of the time and then be able to pull back when needed? Or like, I don't know, what do you think Coach Few learned from that experience going to the Natty and where we are now?
So I probably watched that game. I watched the Final Four in that game all the time. It's on my DVR probably once a month if I'm just doing that. I love both those games are great. And I think our pace was really impacted by Nigel hurting his ankle. Like that dude was on one And if you watch any other game that season, he pushed it, right? Like he's one of the greatest at throwing it ahead, pushing it. I think we flew that year. So I don't know if that game was a representation of Fewy that year, but I do think when I was there, he was more of a chess master. So like if basketball was chess, he would know what offensive play to run for every defensive set that he saw, and point guards would look over, he'd call it, and we would run it. Now he's switched. I think right when we got like Kelly, that's the first year we became the 1 seed. We stopped running like set plays and more did just like more of a flow concept style, letting our guys actually play, like let the basketball players play. And I think since then we've seen our offense is just a million times better to watch. It's not slow at all. I mean, I watch other top 20 teams right now and they look like they're in mud. We are that much faster and share the rock. And I just love the way we play right now. So I think Fewy's always learning, to answer that question, but I think a huge part of that was Nigel being hurt. And then obviously I'm not a big ref hater. Obviously I train refs at the RFC, but those refs, I would have preferred just no fouls for both sides and let the teams play, but can't go.
Yeah, so being at the game, I didn't realize how much that impacted the flow of the game, really, because I was just so amped to be there. Mm-hmm. But rewatching it was like, oh my God, how have they called like 21 fouls and we've got like 5 minutes left or whatever it was. Yeah, that was so wild. That was so wild.
Yeah, see, Dylan and I were in Florence, Italy. It was about 4:30 in the morning, and we were plenty of drinks deep, and we still remember watching it and being pissed about the refs and saw the I was like, I might just be seeing double vision here, but I'm pretty sure that hand was out of bounds. But yeah, next time we'll get them.
Yeah, and I mean, we probably got Suggs because we went to that natty, so I'll count that as a win.
By the way, did you know that he played football in high school?
That's weird. You know what? I just learned that. And I also learned, did you know that Tilly's family has like a volleyball background the last few years? I just learned that today, that he had a volleyball background.
Wild. David Stockton, by the way.
That's right. Next year, if we get Chet, the storyline the whole year is just going to be like, did you know that he played on the same high school team as Jalen Suggs?
It's brutal. It's brutal. We as Zag fans, I feel like we put up with a lot.
Yeah,
definitely first world problems. Like I'm not complaining about where we're at, but it could be worse. We could have Bill Walton every game, who apparently misread the scoreboard during last night's ASU game, which is dude.
I heard a weird take on Walton saying that someone enjoys him for Zag games because he'd rather have someone talk about anything else except the same things we've heard all the time. That was their argument. So instead of us hearing that Suggs played football in high school, we get the Walton Spokane history lesson and Fewy. I mean, and Walton's also a huge Zag fan now. So, I mean, there were some good arguments to the take, but I personally don't enjoy listening to Walton.
On that track, I think I could get behind that if he was doing like the Santa Clara game, because like, no, I don't want him for an ESPN game because we're probably playing somebody pretty good and I want to hear, Farnham break something down. But I would love to have him come in and do Santa Clara and those types of games where we're going to blow teams out. And yeah, I'd love to hear him ramble about, Grateful Dead concerts for 20 minutes.
I agree. Yeah. University of Portland. Are you kidding me? Bring on Walton.
Although last night we had Farnham and they just decided to keep redoing the Alabama football comparison multiple times. Like we didn't get it the first time. When I see Mac Jones do some of the athletic things that Jalen Suggs does, we can make that comparison, but I don't need that drilled into my brain multiple times.
So we've talked a little bit about the recruiting piece so far and how, trickle down from going to national championships, getting Jalen Suggs. You just said that. Corey Kispert's kind of the definition of like the Gonzaga player. You mentioned Pangos was a freshman when you were a senior and kind of that 4-year guy, not a 5-star recruit. Are we about to witness the end of that trend if next year's recruiting class is Holmgren, Salas, Perry, Greg?
I'd say no. And the reason being of how grounded Fewy is, right? Fewy is 20 years into his coaching. He's seen people rise and get those top recruits, but lose their way. I think you see that a lot where you're like, okay, we're winning. Now I can get some McDonald's All-Americans. Let's just get them all. Let's just get them all and they'll work. And I don't think that's how Fewy thinks. I think he's finding guys that fit what we do well and to make us better. So like Chet, I mean, if he had to pick a perfect offense, this is it, right? He gets to bring the ball up. We're fast. He gets to stretch it. We've developed bigs. Like, we're like his prototypical spot. Salas, I haven't seen a lot of tape on him. That's his last name, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but he's a point guard, big, probably wants to run. Perry, I've seen him at the high school camps. He's like a sleeper. No one knew about him till he committed. Bouncy, Brandon Clark comparisons. Like, it's if you watch him, he flies, and it's like those guys that jump twice. That's what he does. So he's kind of like a sleeper Zag recruit. So I still think my wife's the same way. She's like, it's just not like this. It's not the same. It's not like the decade of excellence. It's not. I go, yeah, I get that, but we're the number one team in the nation. So, like, yes, who really cares? But I get that we want to keep part of our identity, and I think we will. I think Fewy is very grounded, where I think a younger coach might fall into that trap of being like, oh, here we go. Let's get all the top recruits. And then it doesn't work out.
Yeah, I think there was an article on The Athletic this year that talked about kind of the Suggs recruitment and how Suggs kind of had to tell them, hey, like, I actually want to be a part of this team. I'm going to buy in. And they're like, yeah, like, are you though? And then worked out. But the fact that you're having to have top 5 recruits convince you that they're worthy of fitting into your team.
It's awesome. I mean, that's the best. That's what you want, right? That's ideal.
Yeah.
Sticking on the topic of recruiting, I feel like over the last decade, Fewy has built up kind of a cool resume of being able to pitch to certain types of players too, which I think helps us out a lot. Like, especially with transfers. I mean, you got Nigel Williams-Goss at the guard position. He was already a good player, but he completely changed what he could do once he got on campus. I mean, Kelly Olynyk is really the prototype, right? Of what it should look like. How do you think the recruiting approach in terms of the pitch, I guess, has changed since your time as manager?
Yeah, I bet you the one thing I bet you is kind of like what Carson was touching on. We are probably not selling ourselves as much as we used to, right? We're probably, people are applying, if you will, like if we were a business, to work for us, and we are being more strategic in who we let into our culture. And I think that's a big thing. I think for the transfer, for sure, right? We're looking for established guys, most likely guards we've seen in the grad transfer realm, that are going to bring kind of an upperclassman leadership element and professionalism that we lose with maybe having some one and done's gone. So that's what I'd say with the biggest change is who we're more picky. Yeah, I think, like, look at my freshman year recruiting class. We got Andy Poling, Grant Gibbs, and my boy Meach. And I mean, that wouldn't rank. I'm sure they did an all-time ranking on recruiting classes. I think I've seen an article on Slipper Still Fits about that. That's low. That's a low one. So, yeah, I think we get to be more picky now, which is awesome.
I think they said on the Believe in Zags podcast that did everybody in that class not stay? Like, did everybody transfer out for some reason?
Yeah,
like,
so
for different reasons, they were all gone.
Poling was just the wrong level. He was a freak when we recruited him, and then just kind of health issues. And so SPU was kind of his speed. Grant was the offensive style. Fewy was trying to go faster, and he was more of a slower point guard, you would say. And then Meach, if you listen to the podcast, Zach and Jack, he's just a freak athlete and goes, you know what, I want to do football. It feels right. And I'm going to the NFL, and then, it's crazy. Meach is crazy. Like, he's a freak. But yeah, no one stayed. Like, my graduating class, when I walked out on the court, it was Rob, who stayed an additional year because of the red shirt, Marquise Carter and I. Like those are the three. So
Right.
I
Right.
would love to
Well,
see a year where it's only the manager that walks out there. He just walks down the aisle. Everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? Like, what are we doing?
That's probably what Kentucky's like. It's just like manager
Yeah.
senior night.
But to his credit, Grant Gibbs actually ended up having a really solid career at Creighton, and I think it was the right place for him.
Oh, no question. That's his. It's like hometown. That McDermott was his guy. Knew how he played. I think that's a big part of it too. Like right system's a big part.
How does Coach Few keep the team engaged throughout a game and a season when WCC play usually ends up being a bunch of blowouts?
Yeah, that's I mean, if you just see how he coaches, just watch him coach, right? End of the game, we're up 30, okay? That C squad, maybe you could call it, is in. Guys that get no burn. That's the only time they're out there. And he's coaching them just as hard as the beginning. Next day at film, he focuses on that tape because that's what we're known for, is developing guys over time, teaching them our way. And I think that's what his greatest strength is I think the starters, it sucks for them. I think to keep them engaged, if you're Kispert and you're going against Portland, you're like, okay, I know I'm getting half the burn I should tonight. I got to be more efficient if I want to get my numbers. Like, that just sucks. But for those bench guys, that's when their season starts. And Fewy coaches them just as hard. Like, film the next day, he's ripping them if they're not doing their assignments. He's applauding them for great plays. So I think from that standpoint, that's how he kind of keeps it engaged. But I do think the starters, it hurts us sometimes because they just don't get to keep going with the same intensity. You go from playing West Virginia, Kansas, Iowa. I mean, it's just, and then you're going to Portland, San Diego. It's just like, you can't compare. It's not even close.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like they maybe even get, like you said, a little bored in the second half. We get those lulls with our starting group in there, and you see Jalen trying to do too much, or they almost get like, all right, well, like let's try some shit here and see what happens, and then we get a little less efficient compared to what we're used to seeing.
Yeah, last night I saw it with like Nemhard took like 4 shots. We didn't share the rock. He like ended the shot clock. I'm like, okay, they're over this.
How many times did you see this team get to the end of a shot clock? I was like, what are we? We only have 15 seconds and we got a shot up.
Yep, it's a great point.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't realize last night because Carson and I we share a YouTube TV account. I didn't realize we got ESPN News. So I'm sitting here just angry as hell, waiting for this college football award show to end. It is like no one is watching this, and then it finally shows up on ESPN, and Sean Farnham goes, I must say that may have been the most efficient, the best 4 minutes of basketball I've ever seen. And I'm just like, are you kidding me?
It's 20-2.
Yeah, exactly. It's 20-2, 5 minutes into the game, and it's like, oh my God. But yeah, wild.
I think we've talked a little bit about the BYU game. A lot of people expected probably BYU of all the WCC teams this year to potentially give us the biggest fits. I know we talked about it with San Francisco where it's like, yeah, they might be one of the tougher teams we play, but we're still going to beat them by 15, 20 points, right? What are your quick reactions to last night's win? You touched on the Nemhard thing, but what are your quick reactions to last night's win, our first, maybe competitive WCC game?
I would call it competitive. I am a firm believer that we are just way above not only the WCC but arguably all of college basketball. So I'm sure on the scouting reports, Fewy isn't focusing on them defensively. I'm thinking he goes, okay, this is how we're going to handle ball screens. So, and this is the guy that can go off, but we're going to, trap him. We're going to go over. We're going to stay in his pocket. And then, but for us, I bet you that whole board is just like, this is what we need to do. I kind of thought like when we were playing, I think B-Mary, you might have brought it up on your last podcast, but when we were going against Virginia, everyone was talking about pack line and how we're going to handle the pack line. And it was like, well, what about how they're going to handle us? Like, He's probably more on the offensive and scouting. Like, guys, if we do us, we're going to be fine. And I think it's been like that in the WCC for a long, long time. So I think this is just like even worse. I think like I'm not looking forward to watching some regular games. I'm just going to be 100% honest. But maybe, treat it as like I'm more interested in – I might just start at the second half and watch the bench guys and start getting really analytical with them. But, yeah, I just think we're so much better.
Some of those bench guy minutes at times have been very, very rough to watch so far. They just seem that you can tell they don't play. They're not on the court together a lot. So
at all. My brother he bet on the game yesterday, and they went like -9 and like 2 minutes, and he lost. So I was like, oh man, that's the risk. You get the boys in there, and my brother goes, I knew I was in trouble with Dominic Harris is pushing it like we're down 30 instead of up 30.
You give a little bit of fire to that when you say, oh, we're the best team in the WCC by a long shot, probably the NCAA. There's been people on Zag Twitter, on Zag boards, or people, maybe more accurately, I should say, there's people that are never on those boards saying, why is Gonzaga playing in the WCC? Do you see a path where few would ever want to leave the WCC? Has that ever been a topic of conversation before that you're aware of?
Well, I mean, yeah, a couple of years ago, I would like to think we bluffed to go to the Mountain West. I really think it was a bluff because the WCC, about like 10 years ago, they switched it, or maybe 8 years ago. It used to be top 2 seeds get an automatic bye to the semis, right? Then they switched it and put us in the quarterfinals. And I remember that really ticked us off because we're all like, from a logistical standpoint, the more teams we get in the NCAA tournament, the better it is. But a lot of people were complaining that we automatically get a bye. We only have to win 2 games. So I think we bluffed to go to the Mountain West, and the WCC then adjusted a lot of things for us financially. So we get automatic in the semis. I know we get a bigger cut for each game that we advance in the NCAA tournament because it used to be just us giving money to the league. So now we get a bigger cut of that. And so I think with our ability to schedule non-conference and our exposure nationally, I don't think we'll ever leave. We're like an auto bid to the NCAA tournament, and that's tough to turn down. That's why we get the grad transfers, because they're like, I want to play in the NCAA tournament. A lot of what we focus on is we just go. We always go to the dance. And so I don't think we'll leave. I wish we would. I wish we were, in the Big East. That would be like awesome. But logistics to travel all those other sports is tough. So then you're like, are we independent Notre Dame football? Like it's a slippery slope. So I think we won't leave, sadly.
Yeah, it's kind of a don't fix it if it ain't broke kind of thing. And at this point, it just keeps getting better. But yeah. I think you kind of just answered it there. I was going to say, if we did leave, if you could have us go to any conference in the country, would it be the Big East? Or are you thinking Pac-12? Or one that would make sense, at least somewhat? Obviously, we wouldn't go to the SEC or the ACC. But
I'd want independent schedule, only top 25 teams. That's what I'd want. I'd want to be like a semi-pro. I'd want to just like travel, like think of it like an AAU travel squad. That's what we were for college basketball, and we only play top 25.
Play like a high school team on a national schedule.
Correct. That's what that'd be my dream. Just we go out and play everybody, and Huey gets to kick it with his favorite coaches. We obviously win. Our resume's like, oh, you have 12 tier 1 wins, and it's just and we're dialed. That'd be my dream.
I just think we need a year. We need to just like make an agreement with the WCC when we have, we could have done it this year, but just be like, we're taking a break. We're going to go play like every single team in the top 25. And we're like, forever, we're just going to shut up all the haters that say we don't play anybody or that we wouldn't win in a major conference. Like, we just need 1 year of that so we can get Swaggy P off Twitter saying we don't play anybody.
I know, Swaggy P. I kind of hope that California tightens their sanctions so we can't play some of those schools, and then we just go off and play the top teams, play Texas, Baylor, all that stuff.
Who do you think would be the toughest matchup of who we haven't played so far this year? Let's say excluding Baylor, but besides Baylor, who would be the toughest matchup?
I'm such a homer. I don't think anyone's going to be tough. I mean, I'd probably say Texas just because it's a little different, but then we played the gimmicky defense, right? You see these teams every once in a while that like are head and shoulders above everyone else in the game. I remember when I was a kid, it was like UConn with Emeka Okafor. I was like, oh my God, like no one's beating them. The 08, when I was there in 08, it was North Carolina with Hansborough and Ty Lawson, and that's who we lost to. Like there are teams that you knew from the get-go were going to win it all or be in contention. Don't want knock on wood. But yeah, I just don't think anyone's going to be really tough for us. And I know that sounds super cocky, but as you all know, you guys have all watched a lot of Zag games, and this team is just different.
It is. This year is different for sure. Anyone who's followed college basketball and the Zag specifically can kind of see that.
You made a comment about Emeka Okafor being like, wow, no one's beating them. When you were a manager on the team, what opposing player in the 4 years you were a manager were you like, holy shit? Like you step on the court, you walk out there, not scared of, intimidated by, whatever word you want to use. Who was that guy when you were a manager?
That I saw live, one, we got Jimmer in the tournament, and Jimmer live, like you see that dude just pulling up, getting buckets right in your eye, and you're like, we got no chance. No one we have can guard him. And then the whole team is like, it's kind of like Warriors-esque, where they were all just trying to get him his shot. So it was like, you have 4 guys creating a shot for one guy. Think about that in pickup. That'd be the worst case scenario if you were guarding that one guy. And then Draymond Green, when he came to the kennel, that was unbelievable. He was a freak. Izzo, probably one of the coolest coaches ever. He's out there for warm-ups with his guys, just hyping them up, which I just freaking loved at that stage in his career. He's still the first one out, like on the bench with his guys. So Draymond and him, and then Kawhi was hyped about when they came, San Diego State. I just remember him like physically was like, oh God, you're different. But he played all right.
What about Steph? You got to see Steph beat us up in the tourney.
That was the year before me. That was 07, 08.
Got it.
If we win that, though, I do think Stephen Gray, his trajectory goes a lot different, because I think he had like 8 threes in that game, 7 or 8 threes. And Steph obviously went way off and we lost, but that was a tough L.
I've got some rapid fire ones for you. T-Nut.
Bring them on. T-Nut. That's a deep cut. Bring it on.
Who's the funniest player you got to work with?
Yeah, that's Bobby Sack, Rob Sacre. No question. That dude is 200. He's just going 200 miles per hour all the time. He's hilarious with everyone. He can talk to anybody. He's the best.
Hardest working.
That's a tough one. That is, I think there's a stigma that not everyone works hard. They all work really hard. Like they're like tons of hours. I'd say what I've experienced, I heard Ravio was like notorious for being the hardest working one. What I saw would have been Kelly once he redshirted. That dude changed his life that year. He stopped, drinking. He stopped doing the things he was doing, and he went full commit. And he was shooting it like till 2 a.m. nightly, in addition to practicing and lifting and doing all that stuff. So yeah, probably KO at that point in time.
Most talented.
Homer, I'm going Stephen Gray. When I was there, he was, people don't know. He literally had a 40-inch vert. Every time he shot it, you thought he was going in. I think the reason he didn't go to the league was might have lost focus, maybe a little burnout, because he kind of specialized in hoops at a young age. I would have liked to see him not get burnout and be dialed, because that dude was a freak.
I'm going to pause the rapid fire for a second and say that one of the craziest things to see at the hoop camp back in 9th grade was the pickup game, and every possession down, Stephen Gray, he's coming off a ball screen, catch and pull up every single time down the floor, and they all went in. He didn't. Yeah. I don't think he missed a single one.
And in practice, we've all played on teams. Like there's days you're not feeling it, right? And there's days that you're just like, I don't got it. Every freaking practice, that dude had it, which is nuts.
No kidding.
At first, when you said Homer, I thought you were going to go with Gary Bell. I was going to say, he dropped 47 on us my freshman year at Bellarmine in the district playoffs. And we threw Luke Meikle, who was at Gonzaga for a year, and then Cal Poly, Sefo Liufau, who was quarterback at Colorado, Isaiah Flynn, Malachi Flynn's brother. Nobody could stop him. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, I played against Steven I said Homer because he went to Bainbridge and I'm from North Kitsap. And I remember there was a day at practice he was dribbling and I came from behind and I picked him and he's like, oh, that would never happen. And I go, actually, it did happen in a game and I have the paper clip and it's like me me with the ball, his foot on my face, and it says Tyler Seth, no points scored, but 1 steal and like 6 rebounds. I was like, and I think he had 45 against us, like something, like he was just different.
You got the steal, and you're like, Coach, take me out. It's time.
Yeah.
Get me out of there.
Camera guy, did you get the photo for the Herald? Shout out Herald.
Who was the most superstitious player?
I really don't remember someone being superstitious. I think they all had their little quirks, but no one like outwardly superstitious. I heard Mo was probably the most superstitious. I heard he used to get the same Subway sandwich before every game, and he'd eat it like the same time before a game or something, but he had to have a Subway sandwich. So I remember there's like times and places like there wasn't a Subway and they had to go get it. But I mean, if he's dropping 40, we'll get him any sandwich he wants.
That's good. That's awesome. Who was the player that Coach Few got the most frustrated with?
That's a really good question. One thing I love about Fewy, he's even on his on that gotten tough on, but I'd probably say Stocks. David Stockton, when he started, kind of came in thinking he was something, and then he grew into be an unbelievable player. But yeah, Fewy used to always just have a little extra love for Stocks, I'd say.
Who ate the most?
Oh, Kelly. It's not even a question. Kelly could not eat enough. I remember when his redshirt year, we went to a sushi place in Provo. Why we decided this, no idea. Day of the game. And it was all you could eat sushi. And he literally ate, I swear, he ate sushi for at least 2 hours straight. And the ladies thought like, it became more of like a circus show at the end. And they thought he was kidding. And he's like, no, like hand rolls and like more sushi. And he would just, he could crush food. He was always eating.
That's wild. I mean, was it that way from the very beginning, or did it start his redshirt year?
I think he ate a lot before that too, but I think it was more intentional once he started to transform his body and redshirt.
Who is the most intelligent player you worked with?
I'd probably say Chris Ponarolo P-Mog. He was a walk-on, best magician I ever seen. Or Mike Hart was super smart. I had a lot of classes with Mike. He's a good friend. That's the safe answer. P-Mog, shout out P-Mog.
Who was the whiniest?
I do enjoy this person now. But he whined a lot when he was there. Will Foster. Well, I don't think he enjoyed basketball as much at that stage of his life. But now he's doing great. He lives out here. Good dude, really nice guy. But at the time, I think basketball just wasn't his thing, which is probably tough when you're 7'5" and you're told to be a basketball player. And you're like, I don't really enjoy it. Or
like 20% of the world's 7-footers are in the NBA, and it's like, okay, man, this is kind of your path. Yeah. Finally, who was the most likely to steal your girl?
Oh, easy question. Matt Bolden. My wife loves Matt Bolden. Did then, does now. If he rolled up, she might just pack her bags and say adios. I'm with Matty B.
Yeah, he's a great looking guy. I follow him on Instagram. That I wouldn't blame Natalie if she left for him. If he walked up.
Matt is a beautiful human. He really is, and he's from Colorado. My wife's from Colorado, and it's just like, oh, Colorado, Matt. So yeah, good for her. Good for Matt.
I want to throw one in at the end of rapid fire. Gonzaga is known for its defensive players over the year, whether it's WCC Defensive Player of the Year or the team as a whole being a great defensive team. Who's the best defender when you were at GU?
Yeah, that when I was there, I'm giving it to two people. One is Meach. Meach used to get switched. I remember in practice he'd get switched somehow on the big, and he's going against Rob. He's going against Heitfeld, and he would stop them. He's so athletic. He'd either they'd get him on a high-low, and he would elevate to tip it, or they'd bring it down, and he would just, like, attack them. Some people go in weak, and he would literally, like, just manhandle these grown 7-footers. And then the other one's Mike Hart. Like, the dude's motor is unbelievable. He could guard anyone, any position. We were in a city league when I moved back to Spokane, And the first game we get beat by like 50. And Mike's on the sidelines. I'm like, Mike, you're not on the team. Just join our team. Later in the season, we play the same team. We beat them by 50. Mike was a legit 100-point swing in city ball at Spokane because he ran the whole time, guarded their best player. All you had to do is know how to make a layup, and you'd score points. You just run the court, he'd throw it to you. So those are my two guys.
See, B. Mary and I have our claim to fame with intramurals is we beat Mike's co-ed team one time. We only had 5 guys, and I think they did too. And he was kind of just playing around in the first game, and we next thing you know, it was like 1-point game, and we ended up winning. And then we played him again in the playoffs, and he was just like, "No, screw you guys!" Like, I think he probably did drop 50 on us. We lost by a lot, but like he was not messing around the second time.
Yeah, he has a switch for sure.
Is that your question regarding RFC? Because I definitely want to know the answer. Do you want to ask that one?
Yeah, I'll ask it. Yep. Tyler, obviously you're at the RFC now. How long have you been working at the RFC, by the way? Is it 7-8 years now?
6 years. 6
years.
6 great years.
Obviously, you've had an immaculate intramural career yourself. Heard during the interview that you're actually not sure how many shirts you've got, which is rare air, rare company. I don't know.
I would argue I
know.
have the most, unless I need to know Shelly's, but I have a ton.
I think between you, Shelly, and maybe Zach Brown, who was there for like 6 years as well, getting his sports management masters or whatever. I actually remember he sent me a screenshot the day that he
passed you,
held the record for most got the record for most wins all time, and I'm like, oh man, should I come back like law school?
B. Mary, no one's gonna. I was looking at that. I was looking at all your guys' stats. B. Mary, yours was in 4 years. Like you did yours in 4 years. Like your numbers are nuts. It's amazing you did anything but intramurals. Like the games you played were like full-time school hours wise. So you got 2 degrees. I'll give you a degree in intramurals.
Hopefully, hopefully your parents don't listen to this podcast hearing that you spent your whole time doing intramurals.
No, they know I did. When I was in high school, I was like in the middle of basketball season. We were right in the middle of basketball playoffs, playing Redmond, Skyline, top 10 teams in the state to try and get to the play-in game or whatever. And my calculus teacher tells my mom, "Hey, I think Brian needs a tutor." And my mom goes, I think basketball is probably a more important experience for him right now. So they, mom knew. But you're totally right. My freshman and sophomore year, I'd get done with class and I would immediately go home and start game planning with like Kane Deck and Chris and like, okay, guys, we're playing the club team today. How are we going to guard Madu? Like it was awesome. It was great. But anyway, that kind of leads me to this question, which is, I'm curious if there are any players that you've seen in your 6 years there, Tyler, that you think could have played Gonzaga basketball, either walked on or actually played.
Outside of the obvious, like Brian Pete and Tommy Joyce ones, but
yeah. Oh, T. Joyce, nice, good shout
Bellarmine, out. Yeah, Bellarmine.
Yeah.
I've got to give him the shout out.
I think there's a lot of guys that I've seen, and I think a lot's safe to say that could be a walk-on for the Zags. I think what you're asked to do as a walk-on, you're not playing. It's more effort, show up, play defense, kind of be a body, and be athletic. I think there's a lot of guys that could have done that. I would argue that it was more earlier in my time. We're more academic now, GU is. Like, I like to say when I was there, I think people literally went to Gonzaga for basketball. And that's no joke. And now people are going for school, and that's awesome. Gonzaga is like a great university, and you can get a good education. But I think as a result, we're seeing less skilled athletes or at level, high level of athletes. So, yeah, back in the day for sure. Recently, I'd probably have to say Luke Lenhard. that dude was just massive. Played on the club.
Freak.
Freak. Like easily could be a body to help the Zags. But I don't think I've seen anyone that's going to play and contribute. Like the Mike Hart era it's over. He was the final guy that wasn't recruited. He was kind of like an invite walk-on. And then to like start on the number one team in the nation, that's nuts.
If you know the Gonzaga campus, for people listening, you know that RFC was kind of next to the Martin Center, and now it's next to, what's the name of the new athletic facility?
Volker Center.
Volker. So have you spent any time inside of Volker?
So I've seen it. I've been in there a couple times. It's unbelievable. I hear that it reflects like better than some NBA facilities on kind of what it has. I also heard that college facilities tend to be better than NBA, which is fun fact because they're not recruiting. A big part of recruiting is like, oh, what's your facility? NBA, you're drafted and you're on the team and they pay you to be there. So they're less worried about the bells and whistles. But it's showtime. The film room's awesome. The court is unbelievable. It's right next to they got their own private gym with all the latest, state of the art equipment. Like it's top notch. We're doing good.
I guess my last question, Tyler, would be give us your prediction for the season. How far do we go? What does this year look like for us?
Yeah, I think you kind of heard my confidence throughout the whole podcast if you've been listening, but I think it's a national championship year. I really believe that. I do think the NCAA tournament's a combo of things. This is like, I learned this from Fewy. It's a lot of luck. It's a lot of matchup. It's a lot of like, are your guys just ready to play? I think we're just so deep and got such a good balance of talent and age and experience. If we don't make it and win it, I'll be shocked. I honestly will. I think I'll be bummed. This is my hype. I've never been more excited for a team to win it all.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Awesome.
Agreed.
Also,
Yeah.
You recommended the Evan Mia guy. That dude is legit. I went into a wormhole after the last podcast, and I spent hours just like, oh, what about this? What about this pairing? So I love the analytical thing you guys do on your podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna have him on for an interview next week, so he'll be on the podcast in the future. Yeah,
I do ask him like how much being a Baylor like guy adds homerness to his stats. I do want to know that from me.
I was honestly surprised how like not pro Gonzaga, but just like he does a lot on Gonzaga for a guy who you'd think be like head over boots for this Baylor team and want to do a bunch of stuff with them, but
yeah.
Trying to say Gonzaga's not that good, but
yep. Stats. He's just got to follow the numbers. Take the bias away.
What's wild to me is his social media following. I remember it, like even before the season started, he was like, all right, here's this preseason, whatever. Someone had retweeted him and everything. He had like 50 followers or something. And now he's got like thousands. And it's like, holy crap.
Yeah, thousands. I told all my friends about him. So I'm hyping him up.
Yeah. All right. Well, should we wrap? Tyler, do you want to plug your social media or anything? Or
no plug for my social media. I am actually inventing a game. Me and two of my friends are inventing a game that we're looking to publish this year. So got the design. So maybe once that is, I'll look for a retweet by the boys. But yeah, just love what you guys do. Go Zags. Always happy to listen to a podcast about Gonzaga basketball. So you guys everyone subscribe to the pod. Be a fan.
Thanks for the
Go
plug.
Zags.
Go Zags.
Go Zags.